in Beaumont at the Fire Museum of Texas, and we have a large 24-foot fire hydrant that was donated to us by Disney, and they did it for their release of 101 Dalmatians on video, and then they gave it to us. It's the world's third largest fire hydrant, but the world's largest working fire hydrant. So the building was built in 1927, and it was the Central Fire Station, and at the time that it was built there was horses. So we're standing in the horse stalls right now, and if you look up you can see the pulleys where they would hang the horse harnesses from. And horses were so well trained that as soon as they heard the fire bell, they would step into their harnesses and the firemen would buckle them into their harnesses. There was one horse and his name was Major, and it was his job to go to the chief's house and pick the chief up. So they would buckle him in and they would let him go. There was no driver or anything. He knew to go directly to the chief's house and to pick up the chief and take him to the fire. The horses were so well trained that they worked about 4 or 5 years because it was hard work, and then they would retire them, and what they would do is they would sell them to the iceman or to the milkman. But because of their fire training, when they would hear the fire bell, they would go to the fire still, even though they were pulling an ice cart or a milk cart. So they had to start pensioning them out and just retiring them. So the Dalmatians are known for being fire dogs, but until about the 1980s, our dogs here were actually mostly like terrier type of dogs. They would run with the fire trucks, they would run to the fires with the firemen, that sort of thing. They lived at the firehouses, and they had nicknames. The guys really loved them, and actually when 3 of them passed away, well, 2 of the dogs passed away and 1 of the horses, they actually buried them under the fire station at the time, and they made them little grave markers and had funeral ceremonies for them. This is our 1931 light truck, and it was created by the Beaumont Fire Department. It was built right here in this building by the head mechanics and designed by the mechanics here at the Beaumont Fire Department. It was the very first one of its kind in the nation. They got the lights from a local theater in town, and this truck has an interesting history because it actually reported to 2 very important fires or disasters to the United States. The first one was in 1937, and it was the New London School disaster. It was and still remains the largest and worst school disaster in American history. About 600 students and teachers were killed in a gas leak at the school, and that was before an additive was added to natural gas, that you could smell it. And the whole school blew up, and this truck reported out there. When they got there, there was a news reporter from Dallas, and he wanted behind the lines, but they were only letting rescuers behind the lines, and he wanted back there. So he hitched a ride on this truck, dressed up as a fireman, and it kind of became his breaking news story, and that turned out to be Walter Cronkite. So it sort of made his career. And then in 1947, this truck also reported to the Texas City disaster, which happened in Texas City, and a boatload of aluminum nitrate blew up, and it basically destroyed Texas City, wiped it off the map. They had to completely rebuild. So before the invention of metal fire hydrants, what they would use is a tree log, and they would hollow out the tree log and they would run the water through the tree log. And what would happen is, if there was a fire, the guys would come out, the firemen would come out, and these logs ran alongside the road, and they would dig down to the log, and they would bore a hole in it, and then the water would gush out, and they could use it to fill their buckets, use it to fill their truck. And when it was done, they had to plug up the hole, and that's where that term fire plug comes from. You'll hear people call fire hydrants fire plugs, and that's why they call them that, is because you had to plug up the hole in the water, in the log, for the water. Yeah. Okay, so this is our Gamewell fire system, and this was used before telephones. So what they would do is, if there was a fire, you would run to the nearest one. These were on street corners, and you would pull this down, and it would send a signal that box 132 had been pulled, and the guys knew what corner that was on to go to. They knew the fire was somewhere near around there. Now, when the fire was completely out, what they would do is the chief would come here, and he would open up the box, and there's a little tapping thing in here, and he would tap it, and it would send a signal to all the fire departments that the fire was out or tapped out, and that's kind of where that term comes from. You'll hear firemen even today when they say, oh, the fire's been tapped out, and that means it's done. Okay, so the ladders up here, they are what's termed a pompier ladder, and that is French for firefighter, and they were used to climb high-rise buildings. So what you did is you had a guy that would hold it from this end down here, and he would push it up until the hook hooked into a window. He would climb up the ladder, go in the window, take the ladder out, and hook it up to the next window. And he did that as high as he needed to go. So if they didn't have ladders to get to somebody that on the 15th floor or something like that, they had to use a pompier ladder to get up there. Okay, so this is our firehouse, and we use it to teach kids safety procedures on how to escape from a house if your house is on fire. So we teach them that you get low and you crawl. You crawl out of the house. You don't go back in for your toys or your cat or anything like that, you know, because all of that can be replaced. And then we'll teach them stop, drop, and roll activities. It was actually one of the very first of its kind, you know, in teaching kids behaviors on how to get out of a house if it's on fire or something like that. Before then, they would just tell kids what to do, but this gave them a way to like practice it. So it was sort of revolutionary, actually. Our fire safety house was built in the mid-1980s, and it was designed and built by a carpenter for the fire department, and also the lady that's now our fire chief, Ann Huff.